First, I remove the table saw from its stand and then get a quick height measurement. Then I can flip it over and trace out the tabletop on the bench top. I put the edge of the table saw flush with the edge of the table. Then I install temporary shelf supports. This will make it easier for me to work. After that, I cut out the workbench top. I used my skill saw and plunge cut the corners. Then I used the hand saw to cut out the 2x4. After that, I chiseled out the corners and gave it a quick sanding with some 80 grit sandpaper. Then I built the 2x4 frame for the shelf that the table saw was going to sit on. Once the frame was ready, I could remove the temporary supports and install the shelf base. I measured down using the height that I took off the table saw earlier and left 3/4 inch space for the plywood. I'm going to fine tune this later on, so I'm only going to put in a couple screws right now. Then I could install the shelf plywood and test fit the table saw. Now for me it fit pretty good on the left side, but it was shy about 1/8 of an inch on the right. So here I'm starting a screw, removing the screw that's holding it up, pushing it into location, and then driving the screw that I just put in home. This is so that I don't accidentally use the same hole as the first screw. And the same thing for the other right corner. And then I just slide a piece of wood across to make sure that it's flush on all sides. After that, I'm tracing out the footprint on the shelf. I'm going to cut a hole in the middle of the footprint so the dust doesn't collect on the shelf. With the footprint marked out, I can remove the table saw and then remove the plywood shelf. And now that I know that the height's good on the table saw, I'm going to put a few more screws in the frame of the shelf. Next, I marked out the hole for the dust to escape. This doesn't have to be exact, so I just eyeballed it. Then I clamped it down, and using my skill saw, I used the same technique I used on the tabletop. Then use the jigsaw to finish up the corners. And with that done, I can put the shelf back in place and screw it down. After that, I used my roundover bit on my router just to soften up the edges. And after that, I marked out the miter slots. This will allow my crosscut sled to slide all the way through. I used a 5/8 straight bit on my router and set the depth with the miter gauge already on the table saw. Then I measured over and clamped down a straight edge. This will make sure my miter slots are straight. Once that was done, I test fit my miter gauge and it was a little tight, so I gave the straight edge a couple whacks to the side and mitered again. This will widen the gap about a 30-second. And after that it slid freely, so it was time to put the table saw back in position and test out the crosscut sled. And all that was left after that was to install the shelf underneath for the dust collection. With the table saw installed, that's going to do it for part 2 of this video. In part 3, I'm going to install the router and fence. But first I got to make some wooden T-tracks. If you want to see that, I'll provide a link to the video in the description below. Otherwise, if you liked this video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.